Hey, my name is Mike Lofton, the founder of Lofton Approved. Appreciate you joining me today. We're going to go through a brief, and by brief I mean a condensed version of an hour-long training session that we provide focused on interviewing. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to go through the interview training course. Just going to give you some high-level tools and tips and tricks as you're moving into the interview process, whether you've interviewed 100 times before, or maybe this is one of your first ones and you're just looking to get some things right off the bat. That's what we're going to go ahead and provide you today. So let's get started. So what we're going to talk about is what is and is not the purpose of interviewing, proper interview preparation, dress code, the STAR interview method, which is the most common interview method for behavioral interviewing. You know, the good old tell me about a time or tell me an example of when you did X, Y, and Z. I know how much everybody loves doing those, but the STAR interview method is super helpful, and if you prep properly, it's going to help you get through the interview process with a little less pain. Interview follow-up, and we're going to do a little bit of practice. So as we move on, what is the interview? It's the opportunity to sell yourself. You got to put yourself in the hiring manager's position and understand you're not the only interview that day. The hiring manager may be the owner of the company, HR director, maybe another manager within the company. But no matter who it is, they all have other things that they're doing that day. And interviewing you is not the only thing that they have going on. There's probably other interviews going on that day. There's a fire that they got to put out. There's an issue going on with other employees. So I'll be honest with you. Interviewing managers do not enjoy sitting around all day long interviewing. They want to know why they need to hire you. Promote and showcase your accomplishments. Illustrate why you are the right person for the job. There's hundreds of applicants, maybe not hundreds, maybe 10, 20, 30, but the point is you're not the only applicant. So why are you the right person for this job? And then give a feel for your personality and how you're going to fit in. A lot of people don't understand the interview isn't just about your ability to check boxes. Yes, you have the experience, you have the degree, you have all those things that the company may be looking for. Maybe you're just a crappy fit for the company. Your personality isn't going to fit in. You're not going to vibe with the team that you're going to be on. And maybe that's the reason you don't get the job. But that's also part of the purpose of the interview, is for them to understand what your personality is. So what the interview is not. It's not your chance to brag about yourself. It's not the opportunity to badmouth your past supervisor or company. I've seen it happen over and over again. Most of the time, it's not on purpose, it's not intentional, but it's super frustrating when you're interviewing somebody and they're talking trash about their old boss, because if I hire you, I'm going to be your new boss. So if you're willing to talk trash about your old boss, what's life going to look like when you're working for me or you're working within the organization? And it's not your opportunity to tell your life story. This is one of the favorite questions, and again, there's sarcasm built into that. The favorite question of, hey, so how you doing, Joe? Go ahead, have a seat. Tell me about yourself. That interviewer is not asking you to tell your life story, that you grew up in this city and you went to school here and your mom does this and your dad does that. That's not what that question is geared towards. Tell me about yourself is an opportunity for you to give 30, 45 seconds at most about why you're there, specifically from a professional standpoint. So it's not for you to go into a 5-minute thing about all the kids that you have and the hobbies that you have. Yes, those things are important, but you can condense that down to 30, 45 seconds. So please, if you're interviewing, do not drive the interviewing manager crazy with the first question and go into a 5-minute speech about who you are. Interview preparation, do your research, really learn about the company, have a clear understanding of what they care about. Look the manager up or the person that's interviewing you on LinkedIn, see if you can find them on social media. It's pretty easy to do now. Employers are doing it with prospective candidates. There's no reason you can't do it and get a little bit of insight into the person that you're interviewing with and what does the company care about? What are their KPIs or key performance indicators? What are they looking for? What's important within the organization? Because if you have that understanding, when you focus your interview questions around the things that they're going to care about, you're definitely going to increase your chances of getting that job. How to prep for situational interviews. All right, so this is a challenge that I give to anybody that I help coach or mentor, is identify 6 to 8 examples that demonstrate the behavior the manager would want. Well, that sounds pretty broad in scope, but if you take the time to look up behavioral interviewing online, you're going to be able to see that most of the time these questions fall into very specific categories. The questions that are being asked are always going to gear around people, they're going to gear around sales, they're going to gear around customers, They're going to deal around adversity. They're going to deal around your engagement with your boss, and they're going to deal with your engagement with your peers. That's really kind of the key categories that behavioral questions fall into, but it could also vary depending on what industry you're in. If you're in an environment where you're going to operate power equipment, or maybe there's OSHA regulations, or you're in the restaurant industry, behavioral questions may gear around those specific categories. So if you do your research, understand the job that you're applying to, you can, on the front side, get yourself ready for your answers that will fall into those key categories, and then you're ready to go. You already have the examples in the back of your mind before you even get into the interview. I always suggest to people that half your examples should be positive. Positive meaning you brought value to what was going on. Maybe you led a project, maybe you led a change within a company that you've been in before, but mix that up so you've got a good mix of positive examples, but then you always want to be able to have examples to where maybe things didn't start off so well. They're negative, but you made the best of them to influence a positive result. So if you've got 4 really great things that you can speak about, and then you've got 4 or 5 things that, hey, this didn't go so well, maybe my relationship with somebody wasn't so well, but it ended up turning out and being a positive situation, that's how you can nail behavioral interviews. So vary your examples. Don't just use one position. Remember, you've got a ton of history, or maybe you don't have a ton of history, but don't pigeonhole yourself into just one job, especially if on your resume you have years of experience at different companies and different positions, but you just keep talking about the same position that you just left or that you're trying to leave. Mix it up. Show your boss that you have the ability to give examples from different experiences that you've had. Use relatively recent examples. You may forget important details from 10 years ago, but quite honestly, you want to stay relevant. How business operates today is not the same as it did 10 years ago. So if you keep talking about a position that you were in 10 years ago, you're not showing necessarily that you're able to fit in with how companies are operating today, and that could be a detriment to your ability to get the job. Review your resume prior to the interview. I do that a lot when I'm trying to help people, is going through their resume and saying, well, hey, what about this 3 years ago? Tell me some things that you did in that job. And then it jogs their memory where they go, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. Oh, I do have an example of something that happened from 3 years ago. So jog your memory based on your resume, and then your pay rate is based on resume information. And I'm not doing a resume review, but it is something that I've seen people leave off their resumes and not understanding that a lot of the times in especially corporations, your pay rate is based on your experience that is keyed into a system. So if your job or your time on a job is not on your resume, the hiring manager doesn't know that, so they key in the information that you provide them, and you may have kind of screwed yourself out of additional pay and not even realize it. Update contact information on your resume. Folks, please do me a favor. If you are BillyBob6969 at yahoo.com and that's on your resume, go get a new email address. BigPimpin420 at gmail.com. That is your personal email address, and you're giving insight into your personality on your resume. Average time that people review resumes is 7 seconds. That's it. 7 seconds. So if one of the first thing that's on there is something that could be perceived as offensive and you're putting it on your professional resume, take the time, go open a new Gmail account and just come up with something basic. Your first name, your last name, _01 at gmail.com, and call it a day. What you do in your personal life is your personal life, but if you're bringing it to the workplace, right on your resume, 7 seconds. If I see I love 69 at gmail.com, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to take that applicant very seriously, and I'm moving on to the other 200 that I need to read by lunchtime. Make sure you update your resume to include the time with each company and the position you were in. Again, we talked about the missing pay and how that can negatively affect you. And then make your resume fit to the job that you're applying to. There's nothing worse than reading a resume and everything that's on it has nothing to do with what the company's actually hiring for. That's very obvious that you're just copying and pasting your resume into every single job that you're applying for, which means you're not taking the organization seriously. So dress code, real simple here. Dress the way you want to be perceived by the specific employer. Again, research is key here. Some companies have adopted a less stringent job code, or I'm sorry, dress code. So you show up to a suit in an office where nobody wears a suit. That may not be the best impression right off the bat, but the alternative is true. You show up to a lawyer's office and you're wearing jeans, that's probably not going to go very well. So figure out what's going on with the company that you're applying to. Make sure that you're blending in. Again, they're looking at your personality, and sometimes dress code can feed into that. All right, so here's the good old fun stuff that people love to read. Give me an example of a difficult problem you solved at work. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake. If you're cringing right now because you know that this is coming at you, remember what we talked about. Before you go to the interview, have 6 to 8 examples of things that are aligned with these type of questions. It's easy to do. I pulled these right off of Indeed. I copy and pasted the Indeed article. Go online and really get an understanding of behavioral interview questions, because as you can see here on the screen, and you can go back and check this out on your own, there's very specific reasons why these questions are being asked. So do yourself the favor of doing the research, but also understand this next one. As far as group exercise, I'm going to give you just a second here, maybe a couple minutes. I'm going to continue to move on, but I would encourage you to pause it and work on this on your own. Question number 1, can you give me an example of a difficult problem you solved at work? How did you go about reaching this solution? So go ahead and pause this, answer this question, but I want you to answer it and look at the explanation below it of why this question is being asked. So go ahead and pause it, practice this on yourself, and then come on back when you're ready. All right, so we're going to move into the STAR interview method. STAR stands for situation or task, action you took, and what was the result. So this is how you get very specific in how you answer your questions that are being asked. So you're actually making the whole process flow, as opposed to bouncing all around or missing the point in what's being asked. And then you get that dreaded, I know you've been through it before. You answer the question, you think you've nailed it, and then they ask follow-up questions. Well, they're asking follow-up questions because you've missed something in here. You didn't specifically state the situation or task. You weren't specific about it. So if you go back to the question that we looked at before and talk about a difficult task, or pick a question, you go back to that and you say, oh yeah, I deal with that all the time at my current job. Dealing with customers is difficult, but I always make sure that I do the right thing and I take care of them. That's a crap answer because you didn't follow the STAR method. Be specific. Talk about a specific customer problem that you had, and then what action did you take to go through it. Each answer should be 45 seconds to a minute long. If you get good at this, you can get it narrowed down to that point to where you're able to say, let's pretend that you get asked, tell me about a time that you dealt with a difficult customer. Your answer should be very fluid in the sense of, hey, yes, at my last job, I had this customer that came in and they were looking for a widget and I didn't know where the widget was and they got really upset with me. So what I did was I went to my manager, because I was new in that department or I was new in that area, and I asked my manager, where is this located? I went back to the customer. I apologized, let them know what the situation was, that I was new in the area, but I did find an answer for them. So I took them over to the product, or I guided them over to where they needed to be, and I got them taken care of. The customer was happy, but what I did afterwards was I went back and did some additional training so I had a better understanding of what was going on in the area I was responsible for. And as a result, if it's important for you to talk about it, you need to articulate what the result of that was. So as a result, I became more familiar, and as I interacted with more customers, I had more knowledge and I didn't have to go through that situation that I went through the first time. That's it. 45 seconds, 1 minute, and you cover everything in here. So what I'm going to challenge you to do is, you already did the individual practice of give me an example of a difficult problem you had at work. You should have paused. You should have answered that on your own. Now what I challenge you to do is do that again with the same question, but now apply the STAR method to it and see if it sounds different. Can you get it down to 45 seconds to a minute? Are you able to cover everything that's in the STAR interview method? Being specific about the situation or task. What action did you take? Make sure you include other people that were involved in the process. Again, it's not about you bragging on yourself. It's about your ability to walk the interviewer through how you problem solve, how you go and get resources to take care of a problem that you may be facing. And then again, result. I can't drive that home enough. Result, result, result. What happened because of what you did? So as we move on here, interview follow-up. So what do I do next? There are a bunch of different, opinions out there about what you're supposed to do next. When I've hired people or I've interviewed people, I always prefer to get an email the next day. That's just my preference. You'll have HR people that say do it right away. I'm just giving you my perspective on it. Because again, if I interviewed you at noon, I probably had an interview at 11, I probably had another interview at 1 o'clock, and I probably had another interview at 2 o'clock. And then I had a bunch of crap that I had to deal with all through that time frame. So why do I care about the next day? Because if I just interviewed you, I really honestly don't want to have to revisit everything that I just went through. I'm making a decision in my mind of who I'm hiring. I'm dealing with another problem. I'm dealing with an OSHA violation. I'm dealing with something. I don't need my email blowing up with a bunch of emails from people saying, hey, thank you for interviewing, doing all that, stuff that you should do. Give that person until the next day, but definitely do it within 24 hours. And you should tell them that you're thanking them for the time. Recap the excitement that you had or some of the things that you enjoyed about the interview. Maybe you were unaware of something and you had a conversation with the person interviewing you. Include that in there, but do yourself a favor. Don't be fake. Don't put in a bunch of crap that the interviewer is going to bleed or be able to read right through and be able to tell that you're full of crap right off the bat. So please make sure that you're sincere about your email, the things that you did, enjoy about it, you put in there, but keep it simple. It doesn't need to be 2 pages long, and you don't need to put in there about all the reasons that they need to hire you. Just talk about the conversation you had and move on. All right, so for final exercise, I'm going to move on to the question number 2. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake. How did you handle the experience? And I want you to answer this on your own using the STAR interview method, but I threw something else in there. This is an example of a company that I used to work at before, that this is the actual grading scale. Now, whether it's this one or a different one, they're all very similar. But if we look through here, number 1, unacceptable. So if you're answering a question about a time that you made a mistake, which if you read the description, everyone makes mistakes at some point, and how candidates deal with their errors can tell you about their humility and personal accountability. Those are key things that employers are looking for. Are you accountable for your own actions? And this is how they're going to rate you, or similarly, based on your answers. So 1 being garbage, there's not a chance that they're going to hire you. And then number 5, you're the best candidate they could think of when it came to this question. Number 1 became very discouraged. 5 remained highly positive and completely composed through the entire situation. Which spectrum do you want to fall on? So again, if you take everything through this presentation, it brings you to this. How are you going to end up being perceived?